Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to kick off today's session with our end-of-course review on consumer behavior key concepts. We're going to explore the fundamental ideas that shape how consumers make decisions and influence markets. Over the next few slides, we'll cover the essential theories, models, and practical insights that you've learned throughout this course. So, let's get started and dive into the key concepts that will help deepen your understanding of consumer behavior. Now, let's explore some of the key applications of consumer behavior. These include predicting market trends, which helps businesses stay ahead of the curve. It also involves designing persuasive advertising campaigns that truly connect with consumers. Additionally, understanding consumer behavior allows companies to optimize product features to better meet customer needs, and ultimately, it enhances customer satisfaction. This knowledge is absolutely essential for anyone looking to build a career in marketing, brand management, retail, or business strategy. Next, it's important to recognize that the field of consumer behavior examines the entire spectrum of how consumers interact with products and services. At its core, it investigates the decision-making processes that lead to purchases. It looks into the psychological triggers that stimulate buying behavior and examines how consumers use products after acquiring them. By understanding these elements, businesses can craft more effective marketing strategies and develop products that truly resonate with their target audiences. Now, let's focus on the core areas of this field. Consumer behavior is an academic discipline dedicated to studying how individuals, groups, and organizations choose, purchase, use, and dispose of goods, services, ideas, or experiences. It's an interdisciplinary field, drawing insights from psychology, sociology, economics, and anthropology, all aiming to create a comprehensive understanding of how the marketplace functions. So, in essence, what is consumer behavior? It's the study of how consumers make decisions, what influences those decisions, and how they interact with products throughout their life cycle. Understanding these processes helps us better predict and influence consumer actions, making it a vital part of any successful marketing strategy. Understanding consumer behavior in crowded marketplaces is crucial because it allows us to create real differentiation. When companies truly grasp what motivates their customers, they can identify underserved needs, craft better customer experiences, and build stronger brand loyalty. This knowledge gives us a sustainable competitive advantage that's hard for competitors to copy, leading to increased market share and better profitability. Deep consumer insights enable us to refine every part of our marketing mix, whether it's product design, pricing strategies, distribution channels, or promotional messaging. When we understand what drives consumer decisions, we can allocate resources more efficiently, target the right audiences with precision, and develop value propositions that genuinely resonate with what our customers need and want. Studying consumer behavior also gives us the power to anticipate needs before they even become obvious. By analyzing purchasing patterns, psychological triggers, and social influences, we can forecast demand fluctuations, spot emerging trends, and position our offerings strategically. This predictive capability helps us reduce market risks and adopt proactive, rather than reactive, business strategies. In essence, understanding consumer behavior is vital because it fuels our competitive advantage, enables strategic optimization, and enhances our ability to predict future demand, ultimately driving smarter decisions and stronger growth. Understanding this framework is crucial for us as marketers because it helps us design offerings that truly deliver value, rather than just focusing on promoting product features. It shifts our perspective from what we want to sell to what consumers actually need and value. This approach makes our strategies more customer-centric, which is key to driving long-term success. At the core, the framework emphasizes the overall assessment of worth in relation to costs, what we call value perception. This is about understanding the emotional response consumers have when their expectations are met or even exceeded. When that happens, we see increased consumer satisfaction. It's also important to recognize the functional, emotional, and social benefits that consumers gain from a product or service. These are the perceived benefits. The framework examines how consumer inputs, such as needs, motivations, and resources, interact with their decision-making process. The outputs include satisfaction, loyalty, and word-of-mouth recommendations. What's key here is that value is highly subjective and personal. What one consumer considers valuable could be very different from another's perception. This complexity is what makes understanding consumer behavior so fascinating. In essence, this framework provides a comprehensive model for understanding how consumers extract value from their marketplace interactions. It highlights that creating value is a multifaceted process, far more than just offering features or setting a price. It involves understanding the intricate interplay of needs, perceptions, and experiences that shape consumer decisions. Once information passes through the attention filter, consumers then organize and interpret it based on their existing knowledge, beliefs, and expectations. This means that perception isn't just about passively receiving information. It's about actively making sense of what we see, hear, or experience. This cognitive process plays a crucial role in determining how marketing messages are understood and ultimately remembered. It's important to recognize that perception varies from person to person. Two consumers can see the same product or advertisement and interpret it completely differently, depending on their psychological makeup and past experiences. That's why understanding perception is so vital in consumer behavior. It's how we connect with our audience on a deeper level. Perception begins the moment we're exposed to stimuli, whether that's an ad, a product display, packaging, a logo, or even a word-of-mouth recommendation. But here, the key point, consumers don't just passively absorb everything they encounter. Instead, they engage in selective attention, focusing on stimuli that are relevant, new, or particularly striking to them, while ignoring the rest. This is why the same advertisement might grab one person's attention, but completely go unnoticed by another. It all depends on what's personally meaningful or salient at that moment. Now, this process, the perceptual process, is fundamental in consumer behavior because it's the gateway through which all marketing stimuli must pass. It involves how consumers select, organize, and interpret sensory information to create a meaningful understanding of their environment. So, in essence, perception isn't just about seeing or hearing. It's about actively interpreting what we experience. And understanding this helps us craft better marketing messages that resonate on a personal level. Effective marketing communication really hinges on understanding how consumers process and organize information. It's not just about what you say, but how your messages fit into their existing mental framework. Messages need to be clear, relevant, and compatible with what consumers already know in order for them to truly understand and engage. This isn't about analyzing physical packaging dimensions. It's about the cognitive process of integrating meaningful product information that can influence their decision-making. As consumers process information, they organize it into mental schemas. These are cognitive frameworks that help them categorize and store knowledge efficiently. For example, many people have a schema for luxury brands that includes ideas like high quality, prestige, and premium pricing. When they encounter a new luxury brand, they apply this schema to quickly understand what the brand represents without having to start from scratch. This process of cognitive organization is crucial because comprehension goes beyond just perceiving information. It involves actively making sense of what they see or hear and fitting it into their existing knowledge structures. Consumers gather information from various sources: direct experience, advertising, online reviews, social media, or conversations with friends. For marketers, the challenge is ensuring that their messages are not only noticed, but also correctly understood and retained. It's about making sure that the message resonates and sticks, so that when a consumer encounters your product or brand, they immediately connect it to their existing schemas. That's how we influence decision-making, by aligning our messages with how consumers naturally process and organize information in their minds. The ultimate goal of advertising is to create memorable brand associations. Effective ads do more than just grab your attention in the moment. They aim to build lasting memory structures that influence your future purchase decisions. That's why memory is such a critical metric for measuring campaign success. When ads succeed in creating strong, positive memories, they forge emotional bonds with consumers that go beyond simple rational evaluation. These memory-based attachments become the foundation of true brand loyalty, meaning that even when there are similar or better options, consumers still prefer your brand. Memory of positive past experiences plays a big role in encouraging repeat purchases. If consumers remember being satisfied with a product or service, they're more likely to choose it again, creating habitual buying patterns that benefit companies through customer retention. Now, it's important to understand that consumer memory isn't just one single thing. It operates through multiple systems working together. Sensory memory holds onto immediate perceptions for a very short time. Short-term memory processes and evaluates current information and decisions. And long-term memory stores enduring brand associations, product knowledge, and past experiences. This long-term system is especially important for marketers because it contains what we call brand equity, the perceptions and feelings that consumers have developed over time about a brand. In essence, memory forms the foundation for all learned consumer behavior. It acts as a kind of repository for past experiences, brand encounters, and product knowledge. Without memory, every purchase would be like experiencing the product category for the very first time, an incredibly inefficient way to navigate today's complex marketplace. So, understanding and influencing consumer memory is key to building lasting brand relationships and driving long-term success. Let's talk about a critical distinction in understanding consumer motivation. Motivation actually originates internally, from the consumer's psychological state. While external factors like advertising or social trends can activate or channel existing motivations, they don't create motivation themselves. So, effective marketing focuses on identifying and appealing to these pre-existing motivational states, rather than trying to manufacture motivation from scratch. Not all motivations are equally powerful, though. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, consumers tend to prioritize their basic physiological and safety needs before moving on to higher-level needs like social belonging, esteem, or self-actualization. This hierarchy helps us understand which motivations are most likely to drive behavior, depending on the context and the consumer segment we're targeting. Now, within these motivations, there's a distinction between hedonic and utilitarian types. Hedonic motivation is all about seeking pleasure or emotional fulfillment. Think luxury goods that boost status, entertainment products that provide an escape, or gourmet dining that delights the senses. On the other hand, utilitarian motivation is more practical. Consumers motivated by utilitarian needs look for products that solve problems efficiently, like a reliable car, durable clothing, or nutritious food. So motivation is really the driving force behind consumer behavior. It's that internal tension that pushes individuals to act in order to satisfy needs or reach their goals. Understanding motivation is crucial because it explains why consumers behave the way they do. It's not just about what they do, but why they do it. Every purchase, whether conscious or unconscious, stems from an underlying motivational state. The power of emotions often overrides logical considerations. A consumer might buy a luxury item they can't really afford simply because it makes them feel successful. Or they might avoid a perfectly good product because of a negative emotional association. This emotional override helps explain why people sometimes make choices that seem irrational when viewed through a purely logical lens. It's important to understand that emotional marketing, creating campaigns that connect with how people feel, recognizes this fundamental truth about human decision-making. Emotions like fear, anxiety, guilt, or sadness also play a big role in driving behavior, often in surprising ways. For example, fear appeals in advertising, like showing what could happen if you don't use a product, can actually motivate action. Guilt about unhealthy choices often leads consumers to buy organic or wellness products. And even sadness can influence buying. Many people turn to retail therapy to lift their mood or find comfort. When it comes to negative emotions like happiness, excitement, contentment, and love, these have a powerful influence too. Positive emotional states make consumers more open to marketing messages, more willing to try new things, and more generous with their spending. That's why brands that consistently evoke positive feelings, think of Apple generating excitement around new launches or Coca-Cola's association with happiness and togetherness, tend to create strong loyalty and preference. So, ultimately, understanding and leveraging emotions is key to connecting with consumers on a deeper level. This slide highlights how personality brand congruence plays a crucial role in building stronger emotional connections and fostering brand loyalty. When marketers craft their brand personalities, they do so deliberately, using advertising tone, visual design, spokesperson choices, and product positioning to attract specific personality types within their target market. Think of brands like People. They can possess distinct personality characteristics. Research shows that consumers tend to prefer brands whose personalities match their own or their ideal self-concept. For example, someone with a rugged, outdoorsy personality might be drawn to Patagonia or the North Face, while someone who values sophistication might prefer Tiffany or Mercedes-Benz. We also explore the concept of brand personality matching, which is grounded in the Big Five personality dimensions. Openness to experience, for instance, describes consumers who seek novelty, embrace innovation, and are early adopters. Conscientiousness refers to those who are organized, plan carefully, and value reliability. Extroversion involves consumers who seek social interaction and respond well to socially oriented marketing. Agreeableness characterizes consumers who value harmony, trust brands easily, and prefer cooperative environments. Lastly, neuroticism describes consumers who may be more risk-averse, sensitive to negative information, and anxious about their purchase decisions. Understanding these personality traits helps us see that personality isn't just about individual differences. It influences what people buy, how they shop, which brands they prefer, and how they use products. By understanding personality, we can better segment our audiences and tailor our messages to resonate with their psychological profiles, ultimately creating more meaningful connections. Let's talk about lifestyle segmentation, or psychographics, which is a powerful way for marketers to identify and target consumers based on their shared values and living patterns. What's interesting is that this approach looks beyond basic demographics like age or income. For example, two people might be the same age and have similar incomes, but their lifestyles could be completely different, leading them to respond to very different marketing messages. Understanding these lifestyles allows us to position our products more precisely and craft communication that truly resonates. It's not just about who they are, but how they live their lives. Now, another key aspect is consumers' beliefs and attitudes, how they see themselves and the world around them. This includes their views on social issues, politics, culture, and business. These worldviews shape how they perceive brands and influence their buying decisions. For instance, consumers who prioritize social responsibility might boycott brands with questionable labor practices, while those with more traditional values may prefer heritage brands that align with their beliefs. Next, we have opinions, what consumers find engaging and important. This can range from family, career, and community to fashion, technology, and the environment. For example, someone passionate about sustainability will actively seek eco-friendly products. Meanwhile, a tech enthusiast is likely to be drawn to the latest gadgets and innovations. Interests like these guide what consumers pay attention to and how they seek out information. Interests also influence their preferences. Think about how they spend their time, whether it's working, hobbies, social activities, or entertainment. An outdoor enthusiast will have different product needs compared to someone who prefers indoor activities. Someone who prioritizes fitness and outdoor adventures might lean towards athletic wear, outdoor gear, and health-conscious food. All of these elements, activities, interests, opinions, and values, combine to form a comprehensive picture of a person's lifestyle. Unlike demographics, which tell us who they are statistically, lifestyle reveals how they actually live their lives. This makes it an incredibly rich and useful segmentation tool for marketers striving to understand and connect with their target audiences on a deeper level. Ultimately, recognizing these lifestyle patterns helps us craft more relevant, engaging, and effective marketing strategies that truly resonate with consumers' lived experiences. Understanding self-concept is crucial because it helps us predict consumer preferences across different product categories. For example, someone with an adventurous self-concept might prefer rugged vehicles, outdoor brands, or experiential purchases like travel. On the other hand, someone with an intellectual self-concept is more likely to invest in books, cultural experiences, and products associated with learning and sophistication. When marketers understand their target audience's self-concept, they can position products as tools for self-expression and identity achievement, making the products more appealing. A key insight here is that self-concept isn't just an abstract psychological idea. It has real, measurable effects on brand preferences and purchasing behavior. Consumers are actively seeking products that help them express, maintain, or enhance how they see themselves. This makes self-concept a powerful tool for market segmentation and brand positioning. Now let's look at the different dimensions of self-concept. First, there's the social self, which is about how consumers believe others see them. This dimension influences purchases that manage impressions or shape perceptions, things like designer labels, status symbols, or products that signal group membership. Then we have the ideal self, how consumers wish to be. The gap between their actual self and their ideal self often drives aspirational purchases, such as luxury goods, fitness memberships, or educational programs that help them become who they want to be. Finally, there's the actual self, which is how consumers currently perceive themselves. For instance, someone who sees themselves as practical and frugal will tend to prefer value brands and functional products. Overall, self-concept encompasses all these thoughts and feelings about ourselves, our self-perception, our identity, and who we see ourselves as. This psychological construct influences consumer behavior profoundly because people often buy products that align with, express, or enhance their self-concept. Essentially, consumption becomes a form of self-expression and identity construction, helping consumers communicate who they are or who they aspire to be. Attitudes vary in strength and accessibility, which are key factors in understanding consumer behavior. Strong attitudes tend to be more stable and resistant to change, making them more reliable predictors of how people will actually behave. On the other hand, weak attitudes can be easily influenced and are less predictive. Now, when we talk about accessibility, we're referring to how quickly an attitude comes to mind. Highly accessible attitudes, those that pop into your mind almost instantly, have a much greater influence on decisions than attitudes that require effort to recall from memory. As marketers, our goal is to create strong, positive, and accessible attitudes. We do this through consistent messaging, positive experiences, and emotional engagement, all of which help make attitudes more stable and readily available. Next, let's look at the 3 components of attitudes. First, the cognitive component, which involves the knowledge and beliefs consumers hold about a product or brand. For example, someone might believe a smartphone has excellent battery life, or that a brand uses sustainable materials. These beliefs form the factual basis of attitudes, although they can sometimes be inaccurate. Second, we have the affective component, which is about feelings and emotional reactions toward the object. For instance, a consumer might love a brand or feel that a product makes them feel sophisticated. These feelings can be positive, negative, or neutral, and often operate independently of the beliefs. People might feel strongly about something without knowing exactly why. Finally, there's the behavioral component, which involves intentions and action tendencies. This is where someone might say, "I plan to buy this product," or "I will recommend this brand to my friends." While intentions are a critical link between what we think and how we act, it's important to remember that intentions don't always lead directly to actual behavior. Overall, attitudes serve as mental shortcuts that help us respond consistently and efficiently without needing to deliberate deeply on every decision. Understanding and influencing these attitudes is central to effective marketing, as they guide consumer choices and behaviors in powerful ways. Importantly, attitude change isn't random or arbitrary. It actually follows predictable patterns based on how we process information both cognitively and emotionally. When marketers understand these patterns, they can design more effective campaigns that steer consumer perceptions in positive directions. Let's start with repetition. Repeated exposure to marketing messages gradually builds familiarity. This familiarity can lead to attitude shifts through what we call the mere exposure effect. However, it's important to note that too much repetition can cause wear-out or annoyance, which can backfire. Next, personal experience plays a huge role. Direct product trials or service encounters tend to shape attitudes more powerfully than advertising alone. A positive experience can help overcome negative preconceptions, while negative experiences can destroy even the most carefully built brand images. Then there's message quality. When the message is strong and well-reasoned, it tends to produce more lasting attitude change. This is especially true among consumers who are highly involved and carefully process the information they receive. Source credibility is another key factor. Messages from trusted, expert sources are more effective at changing attitudes than those from questionable sources. That's why influencer marketing and celebrity endorsements can be so powerful. They lend credibility and influence perception. Now, moving on to the factors that influence attitude change. There are two main routes, the affective route and the cognitive route. The affective route involves creating positive emotional associations through advertising, experiences, or endorsements. Even if we don't change what someone believes about a product, positive feelings toward it can still shift overall attitudes. This approach works especially well for low-involvement products, where consumers aren't scrutinizing every detail. On the other hand, the cognitive route involves providing new factual information that changes beliefs. For example, if a consumer learns that a brand they dismissed now offers superior features, their attitude toward that brand can improve. This route tends to be most effective with motivated, high-involvement consumers who are willing to process detailed information. Finally, while attitudes provide stability in consumer behavior, they're not fixed forever. Attitude change happens when new information, experiences, or social influences alter one or more components, beliefs, feelings, or behavioral intentions. Understanding these mechanisms is crucial for us as marketers, because it allows us to find the right approach to shift perceptions or convert customers from competitors. Group influence operates through several important mechanisms that shape consumer behavior. First, there's informational influence, where we look at what a group thinks about a product as evidence of its quality. If everyone in a group praises a certain brand, we might assume it's better, even if we haven't tried it ourselves. Then, there's normative influence, which is about conforming to avoid social sanctions. People often buy certain products simply because they want to fit in or avoid standing out negatively. And finally, there's identification influence, where we adopt group preferences to maintain our membership or sense of belonging. These social forces can be so powerful that they override our personal tastes, which explains why sometimes we buy things that aren't necessarily our favorites, or why popular products keep gaining market share beyond their actual merits. Now, groups also set norms. These are the implicit or explicit rules about what's acceptable behavior. These norms create social pressure, which motivates us to align our behavior with what the group expects. For example, a teenager might choose specific clothing brands because everyone in their peer group wears them, even if they secretly prefer different styles. Similarly, professionals might favor certain car brands that signal status in their industry. This leads us to the concept of social norms and conformity. Reference groups are key here. They're the social groups we compare ourselves to when evaluating our own behaviors. These can be groups we belong to, like family or work teams, or aspirational groups, like social elites or subcultures we admire and want to join. We tend to adopt the consumption habits, brand preferences, and values of these reference groups to gain acceptance and signal that we belong. Humans are inherently social, and our group memberships significantly influence our choices, whether it's what we buy, how we act, or what we value. This social influence comes from various collectives, including family, friends, colleagues, or online communities. Recognizing these social forces is crucial for marketers, because when we understand how groups influence individual preferences, we can craft strategies that leverage these dynamics, encouraging product adoption and fostering brand loyalty. Let's talk about observational learning and role modeling. Sometimes, consumers observe what products others are using or owning, and from that, they infer whether a product is high quality or appropriate for their needs. For example, seeing a colleague wear a luxury watch might inspire you to aspire to own something similar, even without anyone explicitly recommending it. This kind of indirect influence is quite subtle but powerful, as it shapes our preferences just through exposure to others' choices. Now, moving on to direct influence. This includes explicit recommendations, advice, or warnings. For instance, someone might say, "You should try this restaurant, it's amazing," which directly encourages you to give it a shot. This kind of influence is conscious and deliberate, especially when consumers are actively seeking input during their purchase decisions. Word of mouth, or WOM, is a great example here. Personal recommendations or warnings shared between consumers are incredibly influential. Positive WOM is one of the most valuable tools in marketing because people tend to trust peer recommendations over traditional advertising. On the flip side, negative WOM can be devastating for brands, spreading quickly through social networks and damaging reputations. Then we have opinion leaders, individuals whose expertise or social standing gives their opinions extra weight in certain product categories. For example, a colleague known for their tech expertise might strongly influence others' choices of smartphones. These opinion leaders typically have good product knowledge, strong social connections, and effective communication skills that amplify their influence. Interpersonal influence, in general, refers to the direct or indirect impact that specific individuals have on our attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. While group influence tends to operate at a broader level, interpersonal influence is more targeted, focusing on one-on-one interactions. This makes it often more powerful and precise in shaping consumer decisions. So, in summary, interpersonal influence is a key part of social influence. It's about the personal connections and interactions that can significantly steer our preferences and choices, fitting into the bigger picture of how social factors shape consumer behavior. Understanding consumer culture isn't just about avoiding cultural mistakes, although that's certainly important. More critically, it allows us as marketers to craft messages that truly resonate with people's deepest values and worldviews. When we do this well, we create stronger emotional connections and foster greater brand preference. For global brands, this means adapting how we position ourselves and communicate in different markets. We need to tailor our strategies to fit local cultural contexts, all while maintaining our core brand identity. Cultural values, these are deeply held beliefs about what is good, desirable, and appropriate, play a huge role in shaping consumer preferences. For example, in American culture, there's a strong emphasis on youth, progress, and convenience. That's why products promising to save time, reverse aging, or deliver the latest technology tend to do well here. But in other cultures, where tradition, family, or spirituality are more highly valued, different types of messages and value propositions will resonate better. Let's talk about some key cultural dimensions that influence consumer behavior. One is uncertainty avoidance. Cultures that are risk-averse prefer familiar, established brands and proven products. They tend to resist innovation. Conversely, risk-tolerant cultures are more open to trying new products and untested brands. Another is power distance. In cultures with high power distance, people accept clear hierarchies and status differences. That makes luxury items and status symbols particularly appealing. On the other hand, in cultures with low power distance, people downplay status distinctions, so there's less emphasis on conspicuous consumption. Then there's individualism versus collectivism. In individualistic cultures like the United States, personal achievement and self-expression are highly valued, leading consumers to seek products that help them stand out. In collectivistic cultures, like Japan or China, group harmony and conformity are prioritized, so products that signal appropriate group membership tend to be more popular. All of these cultural dimensions shape how consumers interpret products, advertising, and marketplace interactions. Culture acts as a lens through which we view everything related to consumption. It determines what needs are considered important, what solutions are seen as appropriate, and which behaviors are valued or stigmatized. In summary, understanding these cultural factors isn't just about avoiding mistakes. It's about creating marketing strategies that genuinely connect with consumers on a deeper level, respecting their cultural context while staying true to our brand's essence. Microcultures aren't just smaller versions of the mainstream culture. They actually have their own unique value systems that can differ quite a bit from the dominant patterns. When marketing to these microcultures, it's really important to approach them with genuine understanding and respect. Superficial attempts to appropriate their symbols or customs rarely work and can even backfire. Authenticity is key because members of microcultures are quick to recognize inauthenticity and will reject it if they feel their identity is being exploited for commercial gain. Now let's talk about age cohorts. Different generations, like baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Generation Z, share certain experiences, values, and consumption habits because they grew up during different historical times. For example, millennials and Gen Z tend to be more environmentally conscious, are digital natives, and prefer experiences over material possessions. This means that marketing messages should be tailored to resonate with each generation's unique worldview and priorities. Moving on to religious microcultures, religious affiliation influences consumption in many ways. Think about dietary restrictions like kosher or halal, modest dress codes, holiday observances that impact shopping habits, and ethical concerns that shape how people evaluate brands. Brands that recognize and accommodate these religious needs by offering halal options or modest fashion lines, for instance, can build strong loyalty within these communities. Similarly, ethnic and national origin groups have their own distinctive consumption patterns based on cultural heritage. For example, Hispanic consumers in the U.S. often show strong brand loyalty, appreciate family-oriented messaging, and respond well to Spanish-language advertising. Asian American consumers might prioritize quality over price and prefer brands that are seen as prestigious. Understanding these patterns helps us create targeted marketing that respects cultural identity and avoids stereotypes. So, in summary, microcultures, whether defined by age, religion, or ethnicity, are about recognizing and respecting their unique values and behaviors. When we do that authentically, we can connect more deeply and build stronger relationships with these diverse groups. Now, let's talk about how consumers' moods and temporary conditions at the time of purchase can influence what they buy. For example, if someone is hungry while grocery shopping, they're more likely to purchase more food, especially indulgent items. Similarly, a positive mood tends to increase overall spending and makes consumers less sensitive to prices, while a negative mood can lead to either more emotional purchases or even less buying altogether. Moving on, the concept of antecedent states refers to factors like whether a purchase is for oneself or as a gift, or if it's for routine replenishment or a special occasion. These situations change decision criteria significantly. Gift purchases, for instance, usually involve higher budgets, greater concern about social impressions, and different product preferences compared to buying for oneself. Then there's task definition, things like time pressure, time of day, season, or how long it's been since the last purchase. When consumers are rushed, they tend to make quicker, less thought-out decisions and are more vulnerable to defaults, like sticking with familiar brands. Seasonal factors like holidays also create unique buying patterns. Plus, if someone is running low on a product, they tend to be more sensitive to prices when shopping for a replacement. Next, consider the temporal perspective. The presence and behavior of others can greatly influence what and how much we buy. Shopping alone versus with friends can change our purchase choices and spending levels. Also, Sales pressure from store staff can either encourage us to buy more or hold back, depending on our preferences and the situation. Now let's look at social surroundings. The store environment, lighting, music, crowding, and layout affects our mood, our perception of product quality, and ultimately our likelihood to purchase. For example, upscale stores with elegant decor and spacious layouts make products seem higher quality and justify premium prices. In contrast, discount stores often use warehouse-style setups that emphasize value. Finally, physical surroundings include factors like store atmosphere, which are temporary and context-specific, unlike personality or culture, which are more stable. These situational factors can make the same consumer make very different choices depending on the circumstances, even when considering the same products. Understanding these influences helps marketers create optimal environments and timing for their marketing efforts to be most effective. Let's talk about the magnitude and urgency of recognized needs. Some needs require immediate attention, like when you're experiencing severe pain and need medication right away. Others, however, can be postponed indefinitely, such as the desire for a luxury vacation, something you might dream about but don't need immediately. As marketers, it's crucial to understand not just whether needs exist, but also how urgent and important they are compared to other needs. External stimuli play a big role here. Things like advertising, store displays, social influence, or product exposure can highlight needs consumers weren't even aware of or weren't prioritizing before. A lot of marketing efforts aim to activate need recognition through these external cues. On the other hand, internal stimuli also create awareness of needs. These are physiological states like hunger, thirst, or discomfort, and psychological states such as boredom, anxiety, or aspiration. These internal cues often prompt needs without any external prompting. Then we have different types of needs to consider. Psychological needs are emotional or social, like the need for status, which may drive luxury purchases, or the need for belonging, influencing conformist buying. Self-expression needs can lead consumers to choose unique products. These needs are more complex and can vary a lot from person to person. Functional needs are more straightforward. They are practical problems that require solutions, like the need for transportation leading to a car purchase, or hunger prompting someone to buy food. These needs are usually easier to identify and measure. Now, where does need recognition fit into the decision-making process? It's the critical moment when a consumer perceives a discrepancy between their current state and what they desire. This gap, this recognition, is what motivates action. If no need is recognized, then the purchase process doesn't even start. That's why understanding and sometimes creating need recognition is so vital for marketers. Finally, the trigger point for need recognition can come from various sources. Actual state changes like running out of milk, experiencing product failure, or facing new circumstances, such as starting a new job that requires professional attire. Desired state changes happen when consumers are exposed to better options through advertising or adopt new goals and values. In essence, need recognition marks the beginning of the entire decision-making process. It's that pivotal moment when consumers realize they have a gap that needs to be filled, and understanding this is key for effective marketing. Not all purchase decisions require extensive searching. Typically, consumers conduct more thorough searches when the product is expensive, risky, complex, or personally significant. On the other hand, for routine, low-involvement purchases, they tend to do minimal research. Understanding which category your product falls into is crucial because it guides us on how to best provide information. For high-involvement products, we might focus on comprehensive specifications and detailed information. For low-involvement items, simple availability and convenience are key. Now, let's talk about what influences the effort consumers put into searching. Search effort is determined by the sources they turn to. Marketer-dominated sources include advertising, websites, sales presentations, and packaging. These are all controlled by the companies. While consumers often see these sources as less trustworthy, they are still valuable for learning about options and features. Then there are consumer-dominated sources like reviews, word of mouth, social media posts, and influencer content. These tend to carry more credibility because they come from other consumers. However, savvy consumers are aware of influencer marketing and evaluate these sources critically. We also have neutral sources, such as expert reviews, consumer reports, government ratings, and news articles. These are generally the most trusted because they come from unbiased third parties, but they aren't always easy to access or available at the moment consumers need them. When internal search isn't enough, consumers turn to external sources. They might read online reviews, compare products on retailer websites, ask friends for recommendations, visit stores to see the product firsthand, or research specific features and specifications. The more important the purchase or the higher the perceived risk, the more consumers tend to search externally. Limited prior knowledge or time constraints can also increase external search efforts. Before searching externally, consumers often rely on their memory, drawing from past experiences, previous research, or existing knowledge. For common, low-risk products like toothpaste or groceries, internal search usually suffices because consumers just repeat previous good experiences. Strong brands benefit from this because consumers can easily recall positive associations, making the decision process quicker. Once a need is recognized, consumers usually engage in an information search, seeking out potential solutions. The depth and breadth of this search depend on factors like how important the purchase is, what they already know, the perceived risk, and how much time they have. Understanding how consumers search for information is essential for us as marketers. It allows us to position our brands and products so they are easily discoverable during that critical evaluation phase, increasing the chances that we'll be the chosen option. Now, let's talk about what marketers need to understand when it comes to consumer evaluation. It's crucial to know which attributes consumers use to judge their product category, and also how your brand performs on those attributes compared to competitors. Effective positioning focuses on highlighting the attributes where your brand truly excels, especially those determinant attributes that really drive the consumer's choice. Your communication strategies should aim to make these favorable attributes stand out and be easily accessible during the consumer's evaluation process. Next, let's discuss some mental shortcuts consumers often use. These are called heuristics. For example, consumers might choose the most expensive option as a signal of higher quality, or they might go for a familiar brand because it feels safer. Sometimes, they rely on recommendations or default choices. While heuristics simplify decision-making and reduce mental effort, they can also lead to suboptimal choices if they cause consumers to overlook better options. Now, moving to decision rules, there are non-compensatory rules, where consumers set minimum cutoffs or eliminate options sequentially if they don't meet certain criteria. This makes decisions faster, but it might also mean rejecting options that could actually be the best overall. On the other hand, there are compensatory rules, where consumers evaluate all options across multiple criteria. Strong performance on some attributes can offset weaker scores on others, leading to a more thorough decision. Of course, this approach is more cognitively demanding, but often provides a more optimal choice. It's important to recognize that consumers don't weigh all criteria equally. Some attributes are determinant. They are the key factors that actually influence the decision because they differentiate options and are deemed important. Other attributes might be nice to have, but don't really impact the final choice, especially if all options perform similarly on those dimensions. When consumers evaluate alternatives, they look at what they consider relevant and important. These criteria will vary depending on the product category and individual preferences. For example, when buying a car, consumers might focus on price, fuel efficiency, safety ratings, brand reputation, and styling. For a restaurant, criteria could include food quality, ambience, price, location, and service speed. Finally, let's talk about the evaluation process itself. This is where consumers systematically compare and assess the options they've gathered information on. It's the stage that bridges their search for information and making the final choice. During this phase, consumers apply their decision criteria to narrow down their options and identify which alternative best fits their needs and preferences. Now, let's talk about the alternative evaluation stage. This is a crucial point where marketers have a real opportunity to influence consumer choice. They can do this through comparison advertising, feature benefit matrices, trial offers, and expert endorsements. These tactics can help simplify the evaluation process and tilt it in favor of their brand. However, it's important to be cautious. Highlighting comparisons can sometimes backfire if competitors perform better on key attributes that matter to consumers. Consumers themselves vary a lot in how they evaluate options. Some enjoy diving deep into details, even for small purchases, and their decision-making involves a lot of involvement and effort. Others prefer to minimize effort by using heuristics, simple rules of thumb, and satisficing, which means choosing the first acceptable option rather than the perfect one. Understanding your target audience's typical evaluation approach is essential. It helps you tailor your marketing strategies to match their decision-making style. For instance, if your consumers love detailed comparisons, providing comprehensive information can be effective. If they tend to rely on quick heuristics, simpler messages might work better. Effective alternative evaluation also requires analytical thinking. Consumers need to break down complex choices into manageable parts, recognize trade-offs between different features, and make reasoned judgments about which options best meet their needs. Some consumers go all out, creating spreadsheets or lists to compare options systematically. Others keep it simple, especially for less important purchases, relying on gut feelings or quick assessments. At its core, alternative evaluation is about comparison. Consumers are weighing the pros and cons of different options, assessing how they measure up against each other based on what matters most to them. They don't look at products in isolation. Instead, they compare them on criteria that align with their goals, needs, and constraints like budget and time. Understanding this comparison process helps us see how consumers make decisions and how we, as marketers, can influence that process effectively. Now, while in practice choice and purchase often happen at the same time, especially for impulse or routine buys, they are actually distinct concepts. Choice is the mental decision we make, the thought process behind selecting one option over others. Purchase, on the other hand, is the actual behavior, the action of paying and acquiring the product. It's important to understand that choice generally comes before the purchase. After evaluating their options, consumers make a decision. This is the choice. The quality of that evaluation impacts the quality of the choice. When someone thoroughly assesses their options, they're more likely to pick an option that truly satisfies their needs. The choice stage is different from just evaluating alternatives. Evaluation involves considering multiple options, like comparing 3 smartphones. When you finally decide on the iPhone, that's the choice. But the purchase itself might be delayed due to financial reasons or waiting for a sale. So, the choice is the decision, and the purchase is the action that follows. Making a choice often involves a psychological commitment to one particular alternative. This narrows down the options from many to just one. Especially for important purchases, this feeling of commitment can be significant. It can even trigger regret or second-guessing, which we call choice-induced cognitive dissonance. Ultimately, the choice stage is the culmination of everything that came before, recognizing a need, searching for information, evaluating options. It's the point where evaluation turns into commitment. This decision is a key step before the actual transaction, and understanding it helps us see how consumers move through the decision-making process. Let's talk about the choice stage and how it can be influenced. Marketers have several tools at their disposal, such as point-of-purchase displays, in-store promotions, sales assistance, and making sure the product is readily available. These are all ways to sway the consumer right at the moment of decision. Now, this stage is especially vulnerable to competitive interference. Even if a consumer has evaluated a brand favorably, competitors can still win at this moment through better in-store execution or last-minute incentives. On the flip side, strong brands that have already won during the evaluation phase can reinforce their advantage by making the actual choice process smooth. and by reminding the consumer why they made that choice in the first place. It's also important to consider that the consumer's underlying motivation, what they're trying to achieve, and external influences like social pressure, salesperson persuasion, or limited-time offers can all impact the final decision. Even after a thorough evaluation, a persuasive sales pitch or a friend's enthusiastic recommendation can tip the scales and lead to a different choice. This highlights that motivation and external influence are powerful factors in the decision process. Remember, the choice reflects the outcome of how the consumer evaluated their options. Usually, the highest scoring option on their weighted criteria is chosen. But last-minute factors, like stockouts, special promotions, or sudden changes in circumstances, can disrupt this, even after evaluation is complete. The actual moment of choice is when the consumer commits to one option from their consideration set. This moment can feel very significant, especially for big purchases like cars or homes, where careful deliberation is involved. For smaller, everyday items like candy bars or pens, the decision might be almost automatic and casual. It's crucial to understand this stage, because it's the point where all prior decision-making efforts come together. By understanding what happens during the choice and what influences it, marketers can craft strategies to increase the chances that their brand is selected. So, in summary, the choice stage is a critical moment. It's the culmination of evaluation, motivation, and external influences, all coming together in that single decision point. Companies invest heavily in measuring and improving customer satisfaction because the returns are well worth it. When customers are satisfied, they tend to stay loyal, advocate for the brand, and are willing to pay a premium. These benefits far outweigh the costs involved. Satisfaction actually drives long-term profitability more sustainably than constantly trying to acquire new customers. Loyal, satisfied customers are less sensitive to price changes and promotions offered by competitors. They show a greater willingness to pay higher prices because they trust the brand and value their experience with it. Building strong brand loyalty through consistently satisfying experiences creates an emotional attachment and commitment that go beyond rational decision-making. Even when other brands offer similar or better features, these customers still prefer your brand. Satisfaction also increases the likelihood that customers will repurchase when they need your product again. This reduces marketing costs and helps stabilize revenue streams. Plus, satisfied customers often become brand advocates. They recommend your product to friends, family, and their social networks. In today's digital age, this extends to online reviews and social media posts, which can influence thousands of potential customers. Now, let's consider the consequences of satisfaction. Managing customer expectations is just as important as delivering quality. Overpromising can create expectations that even the best products can't meet, leading to disappointment and dissatisfaction. If performance exceeds expectations, we get positive disconfirmation. Customers are delighted. If it simply meets expectations, that's confirmation. Satisfaction is maintained. But if performance falls short, we face negative disconfirmation, which results in dissatisfaction. The core idea here is the expectancy disconfirmation theory. It suggests that satisfaction comes from comparing how well the product actually performs against what the customer expected before purchase. If performance exceeds expectations, satisfaction is high. If it meets expectations, satisfaction is steady. And if it falls short, dissatisfaction follows. Overall, consumer satisfaction is a vital emotional and cognitive response after using a product or service. It tells us whether the experience met, exceeded, or failed to meet expectations. Satisfaction is one of the most important outcomes because it directly influences whether customers will buy again, stay loyal, recommend the brand, and ultimately, how profitable the company will be. Let's explore how post-consumption satisfaction influences future purchase behavior and customer loyalty. When consumers are satisfied, they tend to develop positive attitudes toward the brand, which makes future decisions much easier. In fact, Satisfied customers often just repurchase without needing to evaluate everything again. On the other hand, if a consumer is dissatisfied, they become more active in searching for alternatives and are open to exploring competitors. This highlights why the consumption to satisfaction process is so critical for retaining customers and maximizing lifetime value. Throughout the consumption process, consumers are constantly evaluating whether the product delivers the expected value. This assessment can be conscious or subconscious. Essentially, they compare the actual performance of the product against what they expected before purchasing. If the product performs as promised or even better, satisfaction tends to follow. But if it disappoints, dissatisfaction can set in, leading to complaints, returns, or even switching brands. Now, performance assessment is ongoing. Over time, consumers observe the product's reliability, durability, and sustained performance. Some products might initially delight, but then disappoint after a while, like fashion items that quickly look outdated. Conversely, others may grow more satisfying as consumers discover new features or become more familiar with them. Maintaining satisfaction over the long term is key to building deep brand loyalty. Let's also consider the importance of extended use. Continued usage reveals a product's true reliability and durability. Sometimes, the initial excitement fades if the product doesn't meet expectations over time. But other times, familiarity and discovering new features can increase satisfaction. This ongoing satisfaction through extended use ultimately fosters the strongest customer loyalty. Finally, the initial use is a critical moment. It's the first real test. Does the product work as expected? Is it easy to use or frustratingly complicated? Does it deliver the benefits you were promised? First impressions are incredibly powerful because they're memorable and can influence all subsequent evaluations. A poor first experience can be hard to recover from, even if things improve later. And it all begins when the customer receives the product, the moment of product receipt. That unboxing experience, first impressions, and immediate functionality set the tone for overall satisfaction. Companies often invest a lot in packaging and presentation here because these early moments really matter. Finally, we come to the consumption to satisfaction process itself. It's about that actual experience, whether the product lives up to expectations or not. This phase determines if the customer's decision was a good one and whether they'll stay loyal or start looking elsewhere next time. This journey from purchase to satisfaction is what ultimately defines the success of a brand. Loyal customers tend to spend twice as much over time compared to one-time purchasers. This highlights the significant value of building loyalty. When we look at loyalty impact, we see that consumers trust recommendations from friends and family more than any form of advertising. About 73% of people place higher trust in personal referrals. This means that advocacy and word of mouth are incredibly powerful tools for growth. In fact, brand advocates, those customers who actively promote our brand, generate 5 times more value than regular customers. They do this through higher spending and by referring others, creating a cycle of increased engagement and new customer acquisition. Now, from a strategic perspective, acquiring new customers is costly, 5 to 25 times more than retaining existing ones. Even a small increase in retention, say, just 5%, can boost profits by 25 to 95%. These numbers clearly show that relationship building isn't just a good idea, it's essential for sustainable success. To foster these strong relationships, we focus on personalization. Using customer data, we can tailor our communications, recommendations, and experiences to individual preferences. This makes customers feel recognized, valued, and understood. Community building is also key, creating spaces like online forums, social media groups, or events where customers can connect with each other and with the brand. This fosters emotional attachment and a shared identity, transforming customers into brand advocates. Customer support and service play a crucial role too. Providing responsive, helpful post-purchase support solves problems, answers questions, and shows our commitment to customer success. When service is exceptional, It turns satisfied customers into passionate advocates. Loyalty programs are another important strategy. Structured rewards, like points, tiers, or exclusive benefits, incentivize repeat purchases and deepen engagement. You see this often with airlines, hotels, and retailers, encouraging continued patronage and increasing their share of the customer's wallet. Ultimately, modern marketing recognizes that the customer decision-making process doesn't end with a purchase or even satisfaction. Instead, smart companies focus on building ongoing relationships that turn one-time buyers into long-term partners, advocates, and co-creators of brand value. This relationship-centered approach is what drives sustained growth and success. Let's talk about consumer misbehavior and how it can negatively impact businesses. It can lead to direct financial losses, increase costs for security and prevention, and even hurt employee morale. Plus, other consumers often suffer too. Higher prices because businesses pass on costs, reduced service quality as companies tighten policies, and diminished experiences due to security measures creating friction. Society as a whole bears costs, such as reduced trust, more regulations, and the diversion of law enforcement resources. One common form of misbehavior is filing false complaints or negative reviews to coerce businesses into giving unwarranted compensation. While legitimate complaints are important, they help improve services. Knowingly false complaints are a problem because they waste resources and unfairly damage business reputations. Let's also consider illegitimate complaints, which are similar but clearly inappropriate. These include aggressive or hostile behavior toward employees, other customers, or property. For example, verbal abuse, physical violence, vandalism, or creating disturbances that disrupt others' experiences. Even if these actions aren't technically illegal, they violate social norms. Moving on to illegal activities, the most notable is shoplifting, stealing merchandise without paying. Retail theft costs businesses billions each year, and those costs often pass on to consumers through higher prices. Other illegal behaviors include pirating copyrighted content, knowingly buying counterfeit goods, or violating terms of service in ways that are legally punishable. Finally, we have fraudulent behaviors, dishonest actions aimed at deceiving businesses for personal gain. This can include fraudulent product returns, using counterfeit coupons, falsely claiming damages to get refunds, or exploiting return policies through serial returns. Serious crimes like credit card fraud and identity theft also fall into this category and have severe legal consequences. In summary, consumer misbehavior encompasses actions that breach accepted norms and can harm businesses, other consumers, and society at large. Recognizing these behaviors is crucial for companies to develop effective prevention strategies and create systems that discourage unethical conduct. Understanding these issues helps us protect the integrity of the marketplace and maintain trust among all participants. Let's explore what falls within the scope of consumer behavior. It primarily draws on psychology, sociology, and anthropology to understand how individuals and groups make marketplace decisions. Psychology helps us understand individual behavior, sociology focuses on group influences, and anthropology considers cultural factors. While it intersects with economics, especially behavioral economics, consumer behavior mainly emphasizes the psychological and social aspects of consumption rather than broader market theories or firm strategies. On the other hand, many areas are outside its scope. For example, financial markets like stock trading, investment decisions, and corporate finance involve different decision-making contexts and theories, though there's growing interest in behavioral finance that bridges these areas. Supply chain management, which deals with manufacturing, distribution, and delivery, is also outside consumer behavior, though consumer expectations about delivery do play a role. Similarly, macroeconomic phenomena such as inflation, unemployment, and economic growth affect consumption, but are not specifically about individual or group consumer psychology. Business pricing strategies, how companies set and respond to prices, are more about economics and revenue optimization, although consumer perceptions of price are relevant. What is truly outside the scope includes brand choice processes, spending patterns, decision-making processes, psychological factors like perception and motivation, social and cultural influences, and post-purchase behaviors such as loyalty or complaints. In summary, consumer behavior focuses on understanding how individuals and groups acquire, use, and dispose of goods and services. It centers on internal psychological factors and external social influences that shape consumer choices, helping us better grasp what drives marketplace decisions. Let's talk about the marketing implications of perceived value. Companies can boost perceived value in two main ways, either by increasing perceived benefits, like adding features, improving quality, or enhancing brand image, or by reducing perceived costs, such as lowering prices, simplifying the purchase process, or reducing risk through guarantees. The key is understanding which approach resonates best with your target consumers, because that's how you create effective value. Now, when benefits significantly outweigh costs, the perceived value is high, making the purchase more likely. Conversely, if costs exceed benefits, perceived value drops and consumers are less inclined to buy. Importantly, this assessment is entirely subjective. Different consumers see different levels of value in the same offering, based on their unique needs, preferences, and circumstances. Conceptually, we can think of perceived value as a balance, what we call the value assessment. This includes various costs like monetary costs, which are the purchase price and ongoing expenses, and time costs, which involve the effort needed to shop, buy, and use the product. There are also psychological costs, such as mental effort, stress, or perceived risk, and behavioral costs, which refer to the changes consumers might need to make to start using the product. On the benefits side, we consider functional benefits like utility and performance, emotional benefits, which are the feelings evoked, social benefits, such as gaining status or acceptance, and epistemic benefits, which relate to novelty or knowledge gained. Perceived costs encompass all sacrifices consumers must make to acquire and use the product, while perceived benefits are all the positive attributes they associate with it. These include practical usefulness, emotional satisfaction, social acceptance, and even the thrill of learning something new. Perceived value is one of the most critical concepts in consumer behavior because it directly influences purchase decisions and satisfaction. It's a holistic assessment, what consumers feel they receive versus what they give up. By understanding perceived value, marketers can position their offerings more effectively and craft messages that truly resonate with their target audience. In summary, perceived value is all about balancing benefits and costs from the consumer's perspective, which ultimately guides their buying behavior. Lifestyle goes beyond just basic demographics like age, income, or education. Two consumers might be the same age and have similar incomes, but their lifestyles can be completely different, which leads to very different buying behaviors. For example, one person might be a thrill-seeking adventurer who buys outdoor gear and travel experiences, while another might be more of a homebody, investing in entertainment systems and cozy furnishings. Recognizing these differences through lifestyle segmentation allows us to target marketing efforts more effectively, focusing on people who share similar living patterns, regardless of their demographic profiles. Lifestyle also reflects a person's worldview, how they think about social issues, politics, religion, business, and even themselves and others. These opinions shape which brands they support, what messages resonate with them, and the products they see as fitting their identity. For instance, progressive consumers tend to support socially responsible brands, whereas traditional consumers may prefer heritage brands that align with conventional values. What captures consumers' attention and enthusiasm can tell us a lot about their lifestyle. Some are passionate about sports, others deeply interested in arts and culture. Some prioritize family and home life, while others focus on career growth or social causes. These interests influence how they spend their money and how they form relationships with brands. Someone passionate about sustainability, for example, will actively seek out eco-friendly products. Lifestyle also encompasses how consumers spend their time, daily activities, hobbies, entertainment choices, social engagements, and household responsibilities. An active, outdoor-oriented lifestyle leads to different consumption habits than a more sedentary, indoor-focused one. Understanding these activity patterns helps us better understand their preferences and behaviors. In essence, understanding lifestyle in consumer behavior is about seeing the bigger picture, how people live, what they care about, and how they spend their time. All these elements combine to shape their purchasing decisions and brand relationships, making lifestyle a crucial piece of the marketing puzzle. Attitudes form through repeated exposures and experiences that build associations in our memory. At first, consumers might have no particular attitude toward unfamiliar brands, meaning they're in a neutral state. But as they encounter marketing messages, hear peer recommendations, or try the product themselves, their beliefs begin to develop, and emotional responses start to form. Over time, these beliefs and feelings combine into overall evaluative attitudes that guide future behavior. When it comes to what influences attitudes, packaging design and country of origin can play a role, but they tend to be weaker and more dependent on context compared to the primary factors. For example, attractive packaging might catch someone's eye initially, but if the product doesn't perform well, that positive impression won't last. Similarly, the country of origin can matter more in categories like German engineering or Italian fashion, where the origin signals quality, but for everyday products, it usually has minimal impact. Lesser influences on attitudes come from peer opinions, recommendations, and observed behaviors, especially for products that are socially visible. If your friends love a certain brand, you're more likely to develop a positive attitude toward it, even without trying it yourself. Conversely, negative word of mouth can create unfavorable attitudes and prevent someone from even giving the product a chance. Social influence is powerful, especially because people often look to others' opinions. When trusted friends advocate for a brand, that can significantly shape attitudes. This is why social proof matters so much in attitude formation. Marketing communications, like advertising, also play a role. They repeatedly associate brands with positive images, emotions, or attributes. While advertising is less influential than personal experience, it's crucial because it reaches consumers early, before they even try the product. These initial impressions can influence whether someone is willing to give the product a shot. However, personal experience remains the most powerful factor. A single positive experience at a restaurant, for example, can create a strong, lasting positive attitude. On the other hand, a product failure can lead to lasting negative attitudes. Personal encounters are vivid, memorable, and directly relevant, which gives them more weight than second-hand information. In the end, consumer attitudes don't just appear out of nowhere. They are shaped and molded through a combination of influences, exposures, social cues, marketing efforts, and personal experiences. Understanding these influences helps us, as marketers, craft strategies to foster favorable attitudes and change unfavorable ones, guiding consumer behavior in the right direction. Importantly, attitude change is not primarily driven by superficial factors like logo redesigns or minor packaging changes, nor is it limited to peer influence, although peers can be sources of new information. Attitude change requires substantive reasons to reevaluate, such as new evidence, contradictory experiences, or compelling persuasive arguments that challenge our existing mental structures. New information that alters emotional responses can change attitudes even without belief modification. For example, learning that a beloved brand engaged in unethical practices might not change what you believe about the product's quality, but it can generate negative feelings that shift your overall attitude. Conversely, associating a brand with positive emotions through heartfelt advertising can improve your attitude toward it. This brings us to emotional reevaluation. Direct experiences that contradict our existing attitudes can be very powerful. If you try a brand you previously dismissed and find it exceeds your expectations, that can change your attitude more than just hearing advertising claims. That's why free samples, trials, and demonstrations are so effective. They provide concrete evidence that challenges any negative preconceptions you might have. Next, experiential change involves factual information. When you discover that a product performs better than you thought, or recognize benefits you hadn't noticed before, your beliefs, and consequently your attitudes, can shift. For instance, third-party endorsements or performance demonstrations are especially effective for consumers who carefully process information. Finally, evidence-based change is about providing credible and compelling new information that directly challenges your existing beliefs. This could include revealing previously unknown product attributes, correcting misconceptions, or showing awards and positive reviews. For example, if you believed a brand was low quality, but then learn it has won industry awards, your attitude might change based on that new, credible evidence. In summary, attitude change most fundamentally occurs when new, credible, and compelling information is presented, especially when it contradicts what we previously believed. This might mean uncovering new product features or providing strong expert validation. Understanding these mechanisms is essential for marketers aiming to convert customers from competitors or repair damaged brand images, because attitudes only change when consumers encounter information that resonates as trustworthy and meaningful. While group influence is undeniably powerful, it doesn't completely erase individual preferences. Most consumers find themselves trying to strike a balance between their desire to fit in socially and their need for personal expression. This ongoing tension is what explains why many product categories offer both conformist options, like popular brands, and opportunities for individualism, such as customization or niche brands, at the same time. When we look at how trends spread, whether it's fashion, technology, or even food preferences, they tend to move through social groups faster than they do between unconnected individuals. Marketers know this well, so they often target opinion leaders and highly connected individuals who can act as catalysts, spreading ideas and behaviors through their networks quickly. Group influence drives the diffusion of trends across populations. Early adopters are key. They try out new products first, and if they're satisfied, they recommend them to their friends. As more people in the group adopt, social pressure builds on those who haven't yet, nudging them to conform. This cascade effect can cause a product or trend to go from being unknown to becoming widespread in a very short period. Now, there are different ways this influence works. First, there's identification influence. Consumers often adopt certain consumption patterns to express their membership in a group or subculture. Think about fan communities or professional groups. Each develops its own distinctive style that members embrace to show belonging and to set themselves apart from outsiders. Then we have informational influence. When consumers are uncertain about a product, they tend to look to what others are choosing as a form of evidence, trusting the group's choices as indicators of quality or appropriateness. If everyone is buying a certain brand, it's easy to infer that it must be good, even if we haven't done our own independent evaluation. And lastly, normative influence is about conforming to group norms to gain acceptance or avoid rejection. This is especially true for products that are visible to others: clothing, cars, phones, where choices are on display and open to judgment. Sometimes, consumers will choose a brand they don't personally prefer simply because it's popular within their social circle. All these influences operate through powerful social psychological mechanisms that can sometimes override our individual preferences and rational decision-making. Understanding these mechanisms helps marketers craft strategies to leverage social influences effectively, and also helps us predict when group effects might be particularly strong. In essence, group influence shapes consumer behavior in profound ways, but it's always a balancing act with personal choice. Recognizing this dynamic is key to understanding how trends spread and how consumers make decisions within social contexts. Let's talk about social class and how it influences consumer behavior. Social class, which is determined by factors like income, education, occupation, and family background, creates distinct patterns and preferences when it comes to consumption. Different social classes tend to prioritize different product features, shop in various venues, respond to unique marketing appeals, and even use consumption as a way to signal or maintain their social position. Understanding these class dynamics really helps us segment markets effectively and position our products in a way that resonates with specific target groups. Now, moving on to culture. Culture provides the overarching value system within which all consumption takes place. Cultural norms shape what needs are considered important, what solutions are appropriate, and how decisions should be made. They also influence what consumption means socially. For marketers operating across different cultures, it's crucial to adapt strategies to align with local cultural values, symbols, and practices. Assuming a one-size-fits-all approach simply won't work. Next, consider the role of peer networks. Friends and social networks are powerful. They provide information, recommendations, and social pressure that guide our choices. Peer influence is especially strong during adolescence and young adulthood, when identity formation and social acceptance are so vital. But even as adults, we're still influenced, particularly for socially visible products or purchases where we might lack personal expertise. And then there's family. Family is our primary socialization agent. From childhood, it teaches us consumption values, brand preferences, and shopping behaviors. Family decision-making varies depending on the product, the family structure, and roles. Who initiates the purchase, who influences the decision, who makes the final call, who actually buys, and who uses the product. Marketers need to understand these roles to craft effective messages. Interestingly, children can have a surprisingly strong influence on family purchases, especially for entertainment, food, and tech products. Finally, we can't forget about the external environment, the social and cultural forces outside the individual that shape their behavior. Consumers don't make decisions in a vacuum. They're embedded in social and cultural systems that deeply influence what they need, want, and buy. Recognizing this external context is essential for developing effective marketing strategies that resonate with consumers' lived realities. Microcultures play a powerful role in shaping brand affinities because they create shared preferences within a community. When members recommend brands to each other, it generates what we call network effects, which can significantly boost a brand's presence and loyalty. Brands that genuinely connect with the core values of these microcultures can build intense loyalty and benefit from positive word of mouth within the community. However, it's important to remember that inauthenticity or cultural appropriation can backfire. Such missteps can lead to backlash and damage the brand's reputation. Microcultures tend to organize around shared interests or activities, like outdoors enthusiasts, gamers, or foodies, which develop specialized consumption needs. They also share formative experiences that shape their attitudes toward technology, work, consumption, and social issues. This creates a distinctive mindset that influences their behaviors and preferences. We see this in generational cohorts too, where values, such as faith-based principles, impact choices around diet, clothing, media, and ethical purchasing. Religious microcultures preserve cultural traditions and language from their heritage, while adapting to mainstream society. Similarly, ethnic microcultures foster a shared identity and recognize themselves as part of a group, feeling a strong psychological connection to others. They maintain specific cultural values that differ from mainstream culture and often show unique consumption patterns, preferring certain brands or shopping behaviors that reflect their cultural identity. Communication within microcultures is also vital. They have their own channels to share information, recommendations, and cultural knowledge. What truly sets microcultures apart from broad demographic segments is their distinct identity, values, and consumption patterns. Unlike just age or income, microcultures are defined by a shared cultural worldview. Understanding these microcultures allows us to target more precisely and approach marketing in a way that's culturally sensitive. They play a crucial role in consumer behavior because they influence how and what people buy, based on their unique identities and community bonds. Situational influences are powerful because they can temporarily override our stable preferences. For example, a consumer who is usually very frugal might decide to splurge if they're in a celebratory mood. Similarly, someone who typically focuses on quality might accept a lower quality option if they're pressed for time. This highlights how important it is for marketers to recognize these factors and adapt their strategies accordingly. Creating the right atmosphere, offering options for different time constraints, and understanding when consumers are most receptive are all key to influencing decision-making in the moment. Purchase purpose also plays a crucial role in shaping decision criteria and processes. When people buy gifts, they consider the recipient's preferences, social appropriateness, and presentation, which are different from buying for oneself. Special occasion purchases usually involve higher budgets compared to routine replenishments. And of course, business purchases follow a different logic altogether than personal consumption. Recognizing these differences helps us understand how context influences what consumers prioritize. Shopping companions also significantly alter behavior. Shopping alone versus with friends, or with family versus independently, can lead to different choices. For instance, children often pressure parents into impulsive buys, while spouses might help constrain spending. When others are present, consumers tend to become more conscious of how their choices are perceived, which influences what products they pick and what signals they send. Time pressure is another critical factor. When time is limited, decision-making becomes quicker and less thorough. Consumers search for less information, evaluate fewer options, and often rely on heuristics like familiar brands or sales recommendations. On the other hand, if they have plenty of time, they can compare options more carefully and seek the best possible choice rather than settling for something satisfactory. The physical shopping environment also has a big impact on behavior. Elements like lighting, music, scent, layout, and crowding can influence mood, how long someone shops, and whether they decide to buy. Online shopping creates a different decision process than in-store shopping. An upscale location can elevate perceptions of quality and willingness to pay, while a discount environment tends to prime consumers to focus on price. Lastly, a consumer's emotional state at the time of shopping can really sway their decisions. When people are in a good mood, they tend to spend more, are less sensitive to price, and are more open to new products or impulse buys. Conversely, negative moods like sadness might cause withdrawal, but stress can sometimes lead to retail therapy as a form of relief. Anxiety makes consumers more cautious, often making them stick to familiar brands and avoid riskier options. All of these factors show how temporary, context-specific conditions, these situational influences, shape consumer behavior in ways that often override their usual preferences. Understanding this helps us better predict and influence actual purchase behavior in real-world settings. Need recognition is absolutely critical for marketers to understand because without it, even the best products can go unpurchased. If consumers don't realize they have a need, they won't buy anything, no matter how superior the product is. That's why marketers focus on stimulating need recognition. By highlighting problems consumers face, demonstrating better alternatives, or creating aspirations. They also make needs more salient through vivid communication, which helps consumers become aware of their unmet needs. Understanding what triggers need recognition in your specific product category is key to optimizing both the timing and the messaging of your marketing efforts. External stimuli like advertising, store displays, product exposure, or social influence can make consumers aware of needs they weren't consciously experiencing before. Effective advertising doesn't just inform consumers about solutions, it activates latent needs, making them feel more urgent and top of mind. There are two main types of need recognition: external stimulation and internal stimulation. External stimulation involves factors outside the consumer, things like seeing an ad, a display, or friends talking about a product. This kind of stimulation often prompts consumers to recognize needs they hadn't consciously considered before. Internal stimulation, on the other hand, comes from within the consumer. Needs triggered internally can arise from a desire for a better state, such as wanting a nicer car after seeing a friend's new one, or from a decline in their actual state, like running out of groceries or breaking a phone. These are often recurring and predictable needs that prompt immediate action. Internal needs can also be driven by a desire to increase a desired state, So, aspirations rising, without any actual decline. For example, seeing aspirational advertising or setting new life goals can elevate what consumers want, even if their current situation hasn't changed. These needs tend to feel less urgent, but can be just as powerful in motivating purchase decisions. Understanding these triggers, whether internal or external, is essential because need recognition is the gateway to all consumer decision-making. Without this first step, no further decision process occurs. That's why it's so important for marketers to grasp what activates need recognition and to sometimes stimulate it deliberately. In summary, the need recognition process involves understanding what makes consumers aware of their needs, whether through external cues like ads and social influence or internal cues like declining situations or aspirational desires. Recognizing these triggers allows marketers to better time their messages and make their products more relevant when consumers are most receptive. The digital revolution has really transformed the way we search for information. Now, we have instant access to vast amounts of information through search engines, review sites, social media, and online communities. This shift has generally increased how much we search and has shifted power toward consumers, who can easily compare prices, read reviews, and evaluate different options. So, for marketers, it's crucial to make sure their products are easily discoverable and that they receive positive reviews across these digital sources that consumers consult during their search. When it comes to experiential sources, they have the highest impact, but they are also limited. Nothing beats direct product trials for providing the most reliable information, but of course, trial isn't always possible before a purchase. Public sources, like consumer reports, expert reviews, and news articles, are moderately trusted and fairly available. They offer relatively objective information, but they don't cover every product out there. Commercial sources, such as advertising and sales presentations, are widely accessible, but tend to be the least trusted because they are biased toward the company's interests. Personal sources, friends and family, are the most trusted, but they have limited product experience and may not have tried all relevant alternatives. Now, if we compare these sources, experts tend to conduct less external search because they already have extensive internal knowledge. Conversely, novices need to do a lot of external searching to build their understanding and make confident decisions. The level of involvement also matters. Products that are central to a person's self-concept or passionate interests tend to stimulate extensive, enthusiastic search. On the other hand, low-involvement purchases usually get only perfunctory attention. The importance of the purchase plays a role too. Expensive, high-stakes items often require extensive searching because mistakes can be costly. Meanwhile, trivial purchases typically involve minimal search since the cost of making a wrong choice is low. Product complexity is another key factor. Technical products like electronics or cars tend to require more search effort to understand features and evaluate alternatives compared to simple products like paper towels or bananas. All these factors influence search intensity. The information search stage is the bridge between recognizing a need and evaluating alternatives. It's where consumers gather the knowledge they need to make informed decisions. The extent and nature of this search vary greatly depending on individual characteristics and the purchase context, which has important strategic implications for us as marketers. Now, let's explore how marketers influence alternative evaluation. They do this by making their products' strengths on key criteria highly salient, meaning they highlight what makes their offerings stand out. They also demonstrate superiority on the most important or determinant attributes, and they position competitors' strengths as less important. Techniques like comparative advertising, feature comparison charts, and offering trial opportunities all help consumers evaluate alternatives more favorably toward the marketer's brand. It's important to understand that consumers often don't score alternatives mathematically. Instead, they make overall gestalt judgments, basically, which option feels best when considering everything. This intuitive evaluation takes into account both objective facts and subjective feelings, but it doesn't involve explicit weighting of each criterion. It's faster, yes, but it can also be biased. Salient attributes or recent information might sway the judgment more than they should. This brings us to the concept of holistic assessment, which involves perceptual judgments that vary across consumers. For example, one person might perceive a brand as more attractive or prestigious than another, even if they are examining the same product. These evaluations are heavily influenced by branding, advertising, and how the product is positioned in the market. Now, let's differentiate between subjective and objective criteria. Subjective criteria are based on personal perceptions, things like attractiveness, prestige, or how well a brand's personality fits with the consumer's identity. These perceptions are highly individual. Two consumers looking at the same product might come to completely different conclusions. On the other hand, objective criteria are measurable attributes that consumers can verify easily: price, specifications, size, features. Rational evaluation tends to focus on these because they're straightforward to compare. For example, one laptop might cost $800 with 16 GB RAM, while another costs $900 with 32 GB RAM. From a purely objective standpoint, these are clear differences. Some criteria are must-haves, or minimum requirements. For instance, if a consumer requires at least 8 GB of RAM, any laptop that doesn't meet that threshold is automatically eliminated, regardless of other attributes. When consumers compare alternatives, they identify which attributes are most relevant to their decision. For laptops, this might include processor speed, storage capacity, or battery life. But not all criteria are equally important. Consumers assign weights based on their personal priorities, which influence their overall evaluation. This process, developing evaluation criteria, is the core of consumer decision-making. It's where all the gathered information during the search stage gets turned into a comparative assessment, ultimately helping to identify the best option. Because this stage determines the final choice, it's a critical focus for marketing strategy. Understanding how consumers evaluate alternatives allows us to influence their decision-making process effectively. Let's talk about this model of consumer decision-making, which illustrates how people approach significant purchases through extensive problem-solving. For major, high-involvement decisions, consumers typically go through all the stages thoroughly. But when it comes to routine, low-involvement purchases, they tend to abbreviate or even skip certain steps, often relying on habits or limited evaluation. And for impulse buys, the process can almost collapse into a near-instantaneous decision. Understanding which decision process your consumers are following for your product category is crucial because it guides the marketing strategies you should adopt. After a consumer makes a purchase, they use the product and then evaluate whether their expectations were met. This step generates either satisfaction or dissatisfaction, which then influences their future behavior and whether they recommend your product through word of mouth. Now, let's briefly walk through the stages. The first is choice or purchase, where the consumer selects an option and completes the transaction. This is when intentions turn into actual behaviors, typically involving payment. Next is the alternative evaluation stage, where consumers compare options based on relevant criteria to determine which best satisfies their needs, effectively ranking their consideration set. Following that is the information search stage. Here, consumers seek knowledge about potential solutions through internal memory or external sources. The intensity of this search varies depending on how important the purchase is and individual consumer characteristics. The initial trigger for the decision process is need recognition. This happens when consumers identify a gap between their current state and what they desire. Once that need is recognized, the process begins. Finally, after the purchase, consumers enter the post-purchase evaluation stage. They assess whether the product met their expectations, which influences their satisfaction level and future purchasing behavior. Throughout this process, understanding each stage, how it might vary, and what influences it is essential for developing effective marketing strategies. Each stage offers opportunities for marketers to influence the consumer's decision in their favor, making this a vital framework for understanding consumer behavior decisions overall. The choice stage is incredibly important from a strategic perspective because it's the point where all your marketing efforts across the entire customer journey either pay off or fall flat. Think about it. Having superior products, compelling advertising, and excellent customer reviews all become meaningless if consumers decide to go with a competitor at this critical moment. Here, factors like point-of-purchase marketing, product availability, staff training, and the checkout experience all come into play and can influence that final decision. Now, while price is always a factor, unless, of course, consumers have unlimited budgets, it rarely determines the choice on its own. Consumers tend to weigh price against quality, features, brand reputation, and other criteria. So the lowest-priced option doesn't automatically win. Often, consumers are willing to pay a premium for better value. Understanding how price-sensitive your target audience is within your category can really help you position your offerings more effectively. Let's talk about price's role in decision-making. Some choices seem obvious. One option clearly dominates. But other times, choices are more difficult because each alternative has different strengths, and consumers have to make trade-offs between important attributes. These difficult choices can cause more stress and even post-purchase regret. As marketers, we can help by simplifying the decision process, highlighting our product's unique advantages, or offering guarantees that reduce perceived risk. Moving on to choice complexity, decision flow generally follows evaluation. The consumer looks at all options, scores them based on their weighted criteria, and usually picks the highest scoring one. But it's not always so straightforward. Situational factors at the moment of choice can shift the outcome. For example, a preferred brand might be out of stock, a sale might make an alternative more appealing, or a persuasive salesperson might sway the decision. These factors can alter what seems like the obvious choice. Finally, the reason the choice stage deserves our focused attention is because it's the moment where evaluation turns into action. After gathering all the information and comparing options, consumers need to commit to one. That's the point where many purchase processes either succeed or fail. Understanding this transition, this critical decision-making moment, is key to influencing your customers and ensuring your brand wins at the end of the day. When it comes to the choice stage, it's all about making sure your brand stands out as the best option when consumers are ready to decide. But remember, this doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of excellence at every prior stage, creating awareness of the need, making sure your brand is discoverable during search, and positioning it favorably during evaluation. Yet, the real test comes at the point of choice, where factors like availability, pricing, promotions, and sales support come into play to clinch the deal when the consumer is ready to buy. This choice moment is crucial because it marks the transition from mere consideration to actual commitment. Once the consumer picks your brand, they move toward making the purchase, though of course, barriers can still pop up. This moment carries significant psychological weight. Consumers are weighing trade-offs, rejecting other options, and dedicating resources. That's why some consumers procrastinate or feel anxiety, especially for important purchases. They want to be sure they're making the right choice. When consumers make their decision, they're also aligning that choice with their personal values, priorities, and self-image. For example, a value-conscious shopper is looking for the best price-to-quality ratio, while someone seeking status might choose a brand that signals prestige. An environmentally conscious consumer will prioritize sustainability credentials. The key point is that the best option is really subjective. What matters most is how well it aligns with the individual's values. Of course, the entire choice process depends on earlier stages. You can't recognize a need if there's no need, and you can't search or evaluate options without having options to consider. This makes the process highly interconnected and sequential. If you fail at creating awareness, providing proper information, or shaping positive evaluations earlier on, the consumer's decision at the choice stage is doomed before it even begins. Finally, selecting the best option is essentially the culmination of all your previous efforts. It's about choosing which alternative from the consideration set will become the actual purchase. This decision encapsulates everything: the evaluations, the perceptions, and the alignments built earlier, and it's the moment where all that work comes to fruition. Consistent satisfaction across multiple purchases is powerful because it builds emotional attachment and loyalty that go beyond just rational evaluation. When customers feel satisfied over time, they become more forgiving of occasional disappointments, are willing to pay premium prices, and resist competitive offers. All of this stems from that accumulated positive experience. This is the foundation of brand loyalty. Remember, satisfaction not only encourages customers to recommend your brand, but also influences their willingness to warn others when they're dissatisfied. In today's social media era, a satisfied customer's experience can ripple outward, impacting thousands through online reviews and social sharing. That means managing satisfaction carefully affects both acquiring new customers and keeping current ones. Now, let's talk about word-of-mouth impact. Satisfaction is a strong predictor of whether a customer will make a repeat purchase. When they are satisfied, they tend to come back. When dissatisfied, they often switch to competitors. So, satisfaction truly becomes the gateway to long-term customer lifetime value. Whether we're talking about a one-time transaction or a sustained relationship, it all hinges on how satisfied the customer is after their experience. Looking at the statistics, we see that when products fall short of expectations, what we call below expectations, only 23% of consumers report being satisfied. But when products exceed expectations and delight the customer, that satisfaction rate jumps dramatically to 89%. And if expectations are merely met, satisfaction sits at around 68%. It's important to understand that satisfaction assessment happens after the customer has used the product or experienced the service. They need to actually experience what they purchased before they can evaluate it. This creates a timing gap between purchase and satisfaction that introduces some risk. Consumers might pay upfront, but they haven't yet confirmed they'll be satisfied. That's why reducing perceived risk is so crucial through guarantees, free trials, or strong brand reputations. These tactics help customers feel more confident in their purchase, easing hesitation and encouraging them to move forward. Post-purchase satisfaction is that critical evaluation point. It determines whether the customer's experience will foster loyalty and advocacy or lead to defection and negative word of mouth. In essence, that moment of satisfaction or dissatisfaction sets the stage for future behavior and shapes the ongoing relationship with your brand. Understanding satisfaction at this definitional level is really crucial because it helps us design marketing strategies that actually enhance satisfaction, rather than just assuming that quality alone is enough. Managing expectations, delivering consistent experiences, proactively addressing problems, and creating positive emotional associations all play a role in boosting satisfaction beyond just the product's performance. Satisfaction isn't just a psychological state. It actually drives important behaviors like repurchasing, recommending, building brand loyalty, and even becoming insensitive to price changes. On the flip side, dissatisfaction triggers returns, complaints, switching brands, and negative word of mouth. These behavioral outcomes highlight how critical satisfaction is as a marketing metric because it directly impacts financial performance through customer lifetime value. While satisfaction involves a cognitive evaluation, comparing how well a product performs to what was expected, at its core, it's fundamentally an emotional response. Feelings of pleasure, contentment, relief, or delight drive satisfaction, whereas disappointment, frustration, or regret lead to dissatisfaction. Interestingly, these emotions often have a bigger impact on behavior than rational assessments alone. For example, a slightly underperforming product that makes a customer feel happy or satisfied might keep that customer loyal, even if a competitor's product is objectively better. That's because the emotional response can outweigh pure performance metrics. Satisfaction emerges from comparison, specifically, comparing our perceived performance against our expectations. If a product performs at 8 out of 10 and our expectations were 7 out of 10, that's positive disconfirmation, and we feel satisfied. But if our expectations were 9 out of 10, then that same performance feels like a letdown, leading to dissatisfaction. This comparison process explains why managing expectations is just as important as delivering quality. Overpromising can inflate expectations, and when the product doesn't meet those heightened expectations, satisfaction can be compromised, even if the quality is objectively good. It's also important to realize that satisfaction isn't the same for everyone. Two customers buying the same product might feel differently about it because their expectations, needs, and standards for comparison vary. Satisfaction is subjective. It's a psychological state that depends on individual standards and perceptions. This subjectivity means companies need to understand different customer segments and their unique expectations rather than assuming everyone has the same standards. Tailoring expectations, management, and experience delivery becomes key to achieving high satisfaction across diverse groups. Post-purchase satisfaction can be formally defined as the consumer's subjective evaluation of whether their experience with a product or service has met or exceeded their expectations. This definition helps us grasp satisfaction both as a concept and as a practical marketing goal. In essence, satisfaction is about how well the experience aligns with what the customer anticipated. When expectations are met or exceeded, satisfaction is high. When they aren't, dissatisfaction sets in. Recognizing this helps us focus on the importance of expectation management alongside product quality to foster positive customer experiences and loyalty. Let's talk about relationship marketing. It's important to recognize that a customer's lifetime value is far greater than what they spend in just a single transaction. When we focus on building long-term relationships, we create predictable revenue streams, which is a huge advantage. Plus, it helps us reduce marketing costs because loyal customers tend to stick around and advocate for us, attracting new customers organically. Essentially, the economics clearly favor investing in relationship building over just optimizing individual transactions. Now, creating spaces, whether physical locations or digital platforms, where customers can connect with each other and with the brand is crucial. These communities foster emotional attachment and shared identity, which makes customers feel like they truly belong. When customers support each other, it also reduces our costs and boosts overall satisfaction. And these communities are goldmines for valuable feedback, co-creation ideas, and word-of-mouth promotion, because members naturally recruit friends into the community, amplifying our reach. Moving on to community building, responsive customer service plays a vital role. It's about solving problems quickly, answering questions thoroughly, and genuinely caring about customer success. How we handle support moments can either strengthen or damage the relationship. Customers tend to remember how we resolve issues more than flawless experiences, so investing in training, empowering support staff, and making help accessible builds strong, lasting relationships. This investment pays off through higher retention and positive word of mouth. Lastly, structured reward systems, what we call loyalty programs, are another powerful tool. These programs incentivize repeat purchases through points, tiers, exclusive access, or special pricing. When designed well, they boost purchase frequency, encourage higher spending, and deepen psychological commitment. Plus, they give us valuable data on customer preferences, allowing us to personalize experiences even further. The key is to make rewards attainable and valuable, aligning them with our brand identity, rather than just offering discounts. In summary, beyond just transactions, building these meaningful relationships through communities, exceptional support, and loyalty programs creates a stronger, more sustainable connection with customers that benefits both sides over the long term. Understanding the motivations behind misbehavior is crucial for developing effective prevention strategies. When we look at reasons like financial pressures, rationalization, opportunity, and thrill-seeking, we can tailor our approaches accordingly. For example, reducing opportunities through better security measures makes it harder for misbehavior to occur. Increasing the likelihood of detection and ensuring swift consequences also serve as strong deterrents. Additionally, fostering an ethical culture where misbehavior feels wrong rather than justified helps prevent these actions from taking root. Now, let's consider the social costs. Misbehavior erodes trust in marketplace institutions, which can lead to more regulation and enforcement, things that often add extra costs and complexity. It also diverts resources away from productive activities, impacting overall economic efficiency. From an employee welfare perspective, when workers are subjected to abuse or misconduct, it causes stress, decreases job satisfaction, and can even drive them to leave the company. This results in higher turnover costs and disrupts organizational stability. Consumers aren't immune either. Honest consumers often end up bearing the costs, paying higher prices, experiencing reduced services, and dealing with increased security measures that can create friction. Sometimes, return policies become less generous, affecting their overall experience. For businesses, the costs are both direct and indirect. Directly, they face financial losses from theft and fraud. Indirect costs include expenses related to security systems, insurance, legal proceedings, and managing employee turnover resulting from exposure to misbehavior. Now, looking at specific types of misbehavior, vandalism, for instance, this involves intentionally damaging property, products, or facilities, which can be costly and disruptive. Aggression, whether verbal abuse or physical violence, creates a hostile environment that affects everyone. Fraud includes deceptive practices like fraudulent returns, coupon fraud, or identity theft, all of which hurt the business financially. Service theft is another concern, such as dining and dashing, fare evasion, or pirating digital content, actions where services are consumed without payment. And property theft, including shoplifting and stealing merchandise, costs retailers billions each year. All these forms of misbehavior reflect a darker side of consumer behavior, actions that violate norms, laws, and social expectations. While most research focuses on legitimate consumption, understanding misbehavior helps us protect our businesses and design systems that discourage these problematic actions. In the end, recognizing these motivations and consequences enables us to better address misbehavior, safeguard our marketplace, and promote a fair, trustworthy environment for everyone. Let's talk about how superior value propositions really work. They either maximize the benefits that matter most to your target audience or minimize the costs that concern them. By understanding which benefits your customers value most and which costs they worry about, you can strategically focus on the key value drivers that truly influence their decisions. Remember, generic claims about quality or price often miss the mark. They don't address the specific dimensions that actually drive choice. Now, let's explore the different types of costs that impact perception. First, risk costs. These are about how likely your customers think something might go wrong, like poor performance, social embarrassment, or wasting money. When perceived risk is high, people are less willing to buy. Next, psychological costs. Think about the mental stress, anxiety, or effort involved in deciding or using a product. Complex products can impose psychological costs, which might turn off some consumers even if the features are excellent. Then we have effort costs, physical or mental energy needed to shop for, use, or maintain a product. That's why convenience-oriented consumers are often willing to pay a premium for solutions that demand less effort. Time costs are also significant. Consider the shopping effort, learning to use the product, or ongoing maintenance. Consumers who are pressed for time greatly value solutions that reduce these time investments. Monetary costs include the purchase price plus ongoing expenses like maintenance or subscriptions. While these are obvious, they aren't always the most critical factor in the decision. It's important to recognize that costs aren't one-dimensional. Different consumers prioritize different value dimensions. Some look mainly for functional utility, while others seek emotional or social benefits. Effective marketing depends on identifying which of these dimensions resonate with your specific target segments. Let's briefly look at these dimensions. Epistemic value relates to novelty, curiosity, or gaining knowledge, Products that offer new experiences deliver this. Social value involves status, acceptance, or signaling identity. Designer clothing that impresses others is a good example. Emotional value is about how owning or using a product makes you feel. Luxury brands that evoke sophistication tap into this. And functional value, of course, is about practicality, like a reliable car that safely transports you and your family. All these multidimensional benefits play a vital role because perceived value is the key driver behind every purchase decision. Consumers don't just buy products. They buy the value they believe they'll receive, which is a subjective assessment of benefits relative to sacrifices. When we understand this from the consumer's perspective, our marketing becomes more targeted and ultimately more effective than just focusing on features or price alone. When we think about marketing implications, it's crucial for companies to focus on building and maintaining positive memory structures in consumers' minds. This can be achieved through consistent quality, memorable advertising, and delivering satisfying experiences. Interestingly, memory doesn't always clearly distinguish between actual experiences and mentally simulated scenarios created by vivid advertising. This means that powerful storytelling can create strong memory traces that influence behavior just like real experiences do. Repeatedly providing satisfying experiences helps reinforce these memory structures, leading to automatic brand preference. Over time, consumers often stop consciously evaluating brands. They simply choose the familiar one because their positive memories make it feel right. This habit forms a very strong loyalty, which is highly resistant to competitive marketing and less affected by price hikes. Now, let's talk about how memory influences the way consumers develop loyalty. Memory provides context when consumers encounter new product claims or features. They compare this new information against what they already know to judge if it's credible and relevant. When their existing knowledge is rich, they can evaluate more sophisticatedly. But if their knowledge is limited, they become more vulnerable to misleading claims or unable to tell the difference between quality levels. Plus, memory determines what new information gets encoded and retained, shaping future perceptions. Moving on to recognition and recall, memory allows consumers to recognize brands they've encountered before and to recall associated attributes, emotions, and evaluations. Strong brands are essentially built as networks of these associations stored in memory. This recognition makes shopping easier, as consumers can quickly identify familiar options without having to process every detail. That recognition advantage is a key reason why established brands often command premium prices. Lastly, memory also stores detailed records of past experiences, both positive and negative. When a consumer faces a purchase decision, they automatically retrieve relevant memories to guide their choice. For example, a satisfying meal at a restaurant remembered positively increases the chance they'll return. Conversely, a negative experience makes them less willing to buy again. This kind of experience-based learning creates efficiency because consumers don't start from scratch each time. They rely on their stored memories to inform current decisions. In summary, memory plays a vital role in shaping consumer decisions, from forming brand preferences to influencing purchase behavior, making it a cornerstone of effective marketing strategies. Together, motivation and emotion help us understand why consumers don't always act in purely rational ways when it comes to making decisions. For example, a consumer might buy an expensive car they really can't afford. The desire for status combines with the positive feelings they anticipate from owning that car, which can overwhelm their usual financial caution. Effective marketing, therefore, taps into both these motivational drives and emotional responses. It creates a compelling urge to buy that feels almost irresistible. Emotional marketing recognizes that feelings often override logic. People tend to make choices based on how they feel first, and then they justify those choices afterward. They're not always thinking through every detail logically at the moment of decision. Brands also form emotional associations. Think of Coca-Cola and happiness or Hallmark and caring. These positive feelings transfer to the products and influence our buying decisions. Additionally, Consumers often imagine how a product will make them feel: happiness from a vacation, confidence from new clothes, security from insurance. These anticipated emotions can actually drive behavior more strongly than rational calculations. Our current mood also plays a crucial role. When people are in a good mood, they tend to spend more and take more risks. Conversely, when they're in a negative mood, they might hold back on buying or indulge in some form of compensatory purchase to feel better. Emotions give that affective charge to our motivations, making them feel urgent and guiding us on what actions seem right in the moment. There are key emotional influences to consider. Understanding which motivations are driving your target consumers can help you appeal to their core psychological needs, rather than just focusing on product features. Some motivations are avoidance-oriented, meaning people want to move away from negative outcomes, like reducing pain, avoiding failure or rejection. Others are approach-oriented, meaning they're driven by the desire for positive outcomes, like pleasure, achievement, or a sense of belonging. There are also unconscious desires, which consumers might not be fully aware of, such as seeking status or trying to compensate for insecurities through their purchases. On the other hand, conscious goals are clear and specific, like, I need a new laptop for work, and these goals drive deliberate searches and evaluations. Motivation creates the push to act. It's what makes consumers feel compelled to satisfy needs or reach goals. And importantly, motivation and emotions work hand in hand. Motivation sets the goal-directed energy in motion, while emotions influence how we experience the process and which actions feel right or desirable. Together, motivation and emotions shape not just whether consumers buy, but what they buy and how they feel about their choices. Recognizing this interplay is crucial for effective marketing because it helps us connect with consumers on a deeper, more personal level, ultimately influencing their decision-making in a powerful way. Both constructs, personality and lifestyle, prove valuable when it comes to segmentation and targeting. For example, personality-based targeting works well when products align with specific traits. Think of adventure travel, which appeals to consumers with high openness. On the other hand, lifestyle-based targeting is effective when products fit particular living patterns, like meal kits for busy professionals. Interestingly, combining both approaches gives us an even richer understanding of our target consumers. Now, it's important to recognize that personality and lifestyle are related but distinct. Personality reflects stable internal traits, traits that stay consistent over time. Lifestyle, however, shows how those traits, along with values, resources, and circumstances, actually manifest in daily living patterns. Two people might share similar personalities, but have very different lifestyles because of different resources or life stages. Conversely, similar lifestyles can emerge from quite different personality combinations. When we look at the relationship between these constructs, we see how they impact consumer behavior. Lifestyle directly influences which products fit into a consumer's life. For instance, an active, outdoor lifestyle calls for different products than a more sedentary, indoor one. Psychographic segmentation based on lifestyle often predicts consumption better than traditional demographics because it captures actual living patterns, not just age, income, or location. Lifestyle describes how consumers really live, covering their daily activities, interests, and opinions. It's observable in their routines and choices. Unlike personality, which is about internal traits, lifestyle is about externally visible patterns. It emerges from the interaction of personality, values, resources, and circumstances, translating internal characteristics into everyday behaviors. Personality also influences consumer behavior. For example, extroverts tend to prefer socially oriented products, while conscientious individuals might prioritize quality and reliability. Personality guides brand choices. People often pick brands that match their own traits. It also affects shopping behaviors, whether someone is methodical or impulsive, and media preferences, what messages and channels resonate best. And at the core, personality is about those enduring psychological characteristics that set individuals apart. These traits remain relatively stable over time and across situations, creating predictable patterns in how people think, feel, and behave. The Big Five framework, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, is widely accepted for understanding these traits. Finally, when we define personality and lifestyle, it's about understanding both internal traits and external patterns. Personality provides the internal blueprint, those consistent traits, while lifestyle shows us how those traits, combined with other factors, translate into daily life. Recognizing both helps us craft better segmentation and targeting strategies tailored to our consumers. Self-concept plays a significant role in purchasing behavior because the products we choose often carry symbolic meaning. For example, a luxury watch isn't just about telling time. It's a statement about the wearer's success and taste. Similarly, a hybrid car isn't simply a mode of transportation. It communicates environmental consciousness. Consumers are very deliberate in selecting products that reflect how they see themselves or how they want others to see them. This makes self-concept a powerful predictor of brand choice. By understanding what target consumers believe about themselves, marketers can position products as the right way for consumers to express their identity. Now, self-concept also involves how consumers think others perceive them, the image they believe they project publicly. This social self influences purchases of products that are visible to others, because consumers often use consumption to manage their impressions. Think about designer brands, luxury cars, or status symbols. These primarily serve social self-needs. Marketers often emphasize how their products can enhance a consumer's public image and social standing. Next, there's the aspirational self, how consumers envision who they'd like to become. This ideal self includes desired traits, achievements, or lifestyles. When there's a gap between the actual self and the ideal self, it creates motivation for self-improvement purchases. Products like fitness memberships, educational courses, or aspirational brands appeal strongly here because consumers believe buying them will help close that gap. Marketers tap into this by promising that their products can help consumers reach their aspirational goals. Then we have the actual self, the realistic perception of who consumers currently are. This includes personality traits, abilities, social roles, and core values. Consumers tend to purchase products that align with their actual self to express authentic identity and maintain psychological coherence. For example, someone who sees themselves as practical will choose practical products. Marketers often position their products as fitting seamlessly into the consumer's current identity, reinforcing authenticity. In summary, self-concept deeply influences consumer behavior because consumption is a way of expressing, maintaining, or even enhancing our identity. Products become extensions of ourselves, tools to communicate who we are, both to ourselves and to others. Understanding this helps us see how powerful brand positioning and marketing strategies can be in shaping consumer choices. Attitude change is neither easy nor guaranteed. Strong attitudes that are based on extensive experience tend to resist change. Consumers often selectively attend to information that confirms their existing attitudes, while dismissing or ignoring information that contradicts them. So, changing attitudes usually requires multiple touchpoints, credible information, and ideally, direct positive experiences that challenge negative preconceptions. Well-crafted arguments from credible sources can be effective, especially when they encourage systematic processing. Testimonials, expert endorsements, and compelling evidence can lead consumers to reevaluate their previous positions. The success of persuasion depends on factors like the credibility of the source, the quality of the message, the level of audience involvement, and whether the message aligns with the consumer's relevant beliefs and values. Moving on, new experiences can generate different emotions compared to previous encounters. For example, if a consumer has a disappointing experience with a brand they once loved, their feelings can shift from positive to negative, altering their overall attitude. Conversely, unexpectedly positive experiences can help rehabilitate a damaged attitude toward a brand. Emotional marketing plays a key role here, aiming to create positive feelings that can improve attitudes even without changing beliefs. Emotional shifts are powerful because they can influence attitudes directly. Next, when consumers learn new information that challenges their existing beliefs, say, discovering that a brand uses sustainable materials, they might change their beliefs about the brand's environmental impact. This can shift their overall attitude in a positive direction. Marketers support this process by providing information through advertising, content marketing, or product demonstrations to help modify beliefs and consequently attitudes. Moving further, beliefs about products can also change through direct experience, using the product and evaluating its performance. Learning plays a role when consumers acquire beliefs through information and observation. Classical conditioning is another pathway, where repeated pairing of a brand with positive stimuli creates positive attitudes over time. Social influence is also critical. People often adopt attitudes held by important others or reference groups. Overall, attitudes develop through multiple pathways, including direct experience, learning, classical conditioning, and social influence. Now, attitudes, these overall evaluations of products, brands, or ideas, serve as mental shortcuts that help us make decisions more efficiently without overthinking. But it's important to remember that attitudes are not fixed. They evolve as we gain new experiences, encounter conflicting information, or are influenced by persuasive efforts. So, understanding these mechanisms helps us appreciate how attitudes form and change in the consumer journey. Social marketing strategies effectively leverage social influences by focusing on key elements like opinion leaders, word of mouth, and community building around brands. By targeting opinion leaders, we can influence their networks more easily because they often set trends and shape perceptions. Facilitating word of mouth is also powerful, as personal recommendations tend to carry more weight than traditional advertising. Creating a sense of community around a brand helps foster loyalty and shared identity, making consumers feel connected and engaged. Positioning products as aligned with or enhancing group identities can make them more appealing. People want products that reflect who they are or who they aspire to be. Understanding social norms relevant to your product category is crucial. These norms help us position our offerings as socially appropriate or even challenge existing norms to create new consumption patterns. For example, green products gained mainstream acceptance partly because environmental consciousness became a social norm. When we tap into these norms, our messaging resonates more deeply. Unwritten rules about appropriate behavior, what we might call norms, cover everything from daily conduct to consumption choices. These norms differ across groups and cultures. What's acceptable in one context may be inappropriate in another. Consumers generally conform to these norms to maintain their social standing and avoid sanctions, which makes understanding them essential for effective marketing. Now, it's important to note that conformity isn't necessarily a bad thing. It actually helps individuals navigate social situations smoothly and signals group membership. Marketers can encourage adoption by making their brands popular within target groups, creating an everyone doing it perception that activates conformity motives. This desire to fit in and be accepted creates pressure to choose group-preferred brands and styles, especially for products that are visible to others. Teenagers, for example, often pick brands based on peer norms because acceptance is so vital at that stage. Moving on to opinion leaders, they're individuals who influence consumer attitudes and behaviors directly. They wield disproportionate influence through their expertise, credibility, or social status. Word of mouth from trusted sources is often more impactful than advertisements because people trust those they know. This influence can be explicit, like recommendations, or more subtle, observing others' choices and assuming they're good. Then there's group influence, which involves the collective impact of social groups, such as family, friends, colleagues, or online communities. These groups create norms that members feel pressured to follow and establish reference points for what's appropriate to consume. They also provide a sense of identity expressed through consumption. Group influence operates through conformity pressure, shared values, and normative expectations, guiding individual behaviors in subtle but powerful ways. Ultimately, social influences, whether from individuals or groups, are fundamental to understanding consumer behavior. Since humans are inherently social creatures, we look to others for information, validation, and a sense of belonging. By understanding how these social influence mechanisms work, marketers can better leverage social dynamics to promote product adoption and strengthen brand loyalty. These factors shape consumer behavior patterns at different levels. First, we have culture at the societal level, which encompasses the broad shared values and norms of a society. Then, we move to microcultures, which are smaller groups within that society, like ethnic communities, religious groups, or even generational cohorts, each with their own distinct identities and consumption patterns. Finally, we have situations, which are the immediate, context-specific factors that influence behavior in particular circumstances, such as time constraints, physical surroundings, social context, or even mood. All three layers, culture, microcultures, and situations, are interconnected and constantly interacting. For example, cultural values influence how microcultures form, and these microcultures, in turn, create situations where their norms and preferences apply. Conversely, situations can activate different cultural values, causing consumers to behave in ways that might differ from their usual patterns. To truly understand consumer behavior, we need to consider all three levels together, rather than in isolation, because each one plays a crucial role in shaping how consumers think, feel, and act. Now, focusing on situations, they are often temporary and context-specific, affecting behavior in particular moments. Factors like time constraints, physical surroundings, social context, how a task is defined, or even a person's mood can have a powerful influence. Situational factors can sometimes override a consumer's stable preferences, leading the same person to behave differently depending on the context. By understanding these situational influences, marketers can better optimize their strategies, whether it's timing campaigns, designing store layouts, or crafting promotions, that align with the most favorable situations for consumer engagement. Moving on, microcultures are small, specialized groups within larger cultures that maintain their own unique identities and consumption patterns. Think of ethnic communities, religious groups, or even lifestyle tribes. Each microculture has its own set of values, communication styles, and brand preferences, which can differ significantly from the mainstream culture. Understanding these microcultures allows marketers to create targeted messages that resonate more deeply, connecting with the specific cultural identities and values of these groups. Finally, at the core of all this is consumer culture itself. It's the system of shared beliefs, values, customs, and behaviors that shape how society relates to consumption. Culture acts as a lens through which consumers interpret products, advertisements, and marketplace interactions. It influences which needs are considered important, what solutions are appropriate, and what consumption means socially. For instance, cultural values like individualism, materialism, youth orientation, or progress heavily influence product preferences and how marketing efforts are received. In summary, understanding the complex interplay between cultural and situational factors is essential for developing effective marketing strategies that truly connect with consumers across different contexts and groups. This model highlights the extensive problem-solving process consumers go through when making important purchases. For routine or low-involvement purchases, consumers often skip or shorten these stages, relying on habits or abbreviating their decision process. Understanding which process your target audience follows is crucial, as it guides us in tailoring marketing strategies at each stage to better influence their choices. After a purchase, consumers assess whether the product met their expectations. This post-purchase evaluation, whether they feel satisfied or dissatisfied, plays a big role in shaping future buying behavior, word of mouth, and brand loyalty. The next stage is choice, where consumers select the best option from their evaluated alternatives. This is often a decisive moment involving commitment, and last-minute factors like promotions, product availability, or interactions with salespeople can sway the final decision. Before reaching that point, consumers compare options during the alternative evaluation stage. They weigh different attributes and criteria, both objectively and subjectively, to find the best fit for their needs and preferences. They assign importance to various factors, rank the options, and identify their preferred choice. Prior to evaluating alternatives, consumers conduct information search. This involves gathering relevant data from their memory and external sources. The intensity of this search depends on how important the purchase is, the associated risks, and how much they already know. The process begins with need recognition, identifying a problem or desire that needs fulfillment. This can be triggered internally, like hunger or aspiration, or externally, such as advertising or social influences. Without recognizing a need, the decision process simply doesn't start. Overall, this consumer decision-making model provides a structured way to understand how consumers move from recognizing a need to evaluating satisfaction. For us as marketers, understanding these stages helps us identify where and how to influence consumers effectively at each point of their journey. When analyzing the choice stage of consumer decision-making, it's important to follow a systematic approach to ensure we cover all the key points thoroughly, but in a conversational way. This framework helps us understand how consumers make decisions and why they choose certain alternatives over others. First, we start with need recognition. This is where the consumer identifies a problem or necessity that requires a solution. If this step isn't recognized, the entire decision process can't even begin. We want to check if internal or external stimuli have activated awareness of the need, and whether that need is urgent enough to motivate action. Next, we verify that the consumer has collected enough information about different product options. Adequate information gathering is crucial because it allows for an informed decision. We need to assess whether the sources used were relevant and whether the consumer understood key differentiating attributes of each option. Then, we look at how the consumer evaluates those options. It's essential that they compare alternatives systematically based on relevant criteria. This means considering attributes that matter, weighting them appropriately, and ensuring the evaluation is fair and logical, rather than just making arbitrary choices. After that, we confirm the consumer has selected the best option based on their evaluation. The chosen alternative should naturally follow from this comparison, although sometimes situational factors might influence the final decision. The selected option should align with their values, budget, and specific circumstances. Finally, after the product has been used, we need to verify whether the consumer's expectations were met or even exceeded. Satisfaction depends on comparing the actual performance to what they initially expected before the purchase. This outcome is critical because it influences whether they'll buy again and recommend the product to others. By following this step-by-step approach, we can better understand the entire decision process, identify potential problems, and see how marketers can influence each stage to steer consumers toward favorable outcomes. This logical progression from recognizing a need to satisfaction after use helps make the decision-making process clearer and more manageable.